microphone and talking on camera?
Yeah.
We were wondering yesterday when the first thing was up there.
Yeah, it's a mic.
Didn't know if it was dead animal or what.
No, it's just the cover for it to keep it.
Check, check, 1, 2. Check, 1, 2, 3.
Good afternoon, race fans. Welcome to Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. It is time for the NASCAR Pinty Series to kick off their 2018 season. Practice has been delayed about 5 minutes. They are about to open the racetrack, but we're not sure how many takers they're going to have. They've announced this is an optional practice session. I guess I should open with my name's Adam Ross, the voice of the NASCAR Pinty Series, joined by Pat Gonzalez. It's been a little while, Pat. Great to see you.
Well, yeah, it has been a few years since we've got a chance to share the microphone here at a NASCAR Pinty Series event, and but always good to work with you, and great to have the NASCAR Pinty Series back here to kick off 2018 season at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. We just wish the weatherman was a little more cooperative here. The fog's gotten a little bit thicker here over the lunch break, and as you said, up to the teams and drivers as to whether or not they want to take advantage of this practice session. If they don't come out for the practice, there is that qualifying session set to go right at the end of the day. Hopefully things clear up and dry up by then, but there are no guarantees.
There's no guarantee that how the track is when we roll onto the racetrack is how it's going to be when this runs and the race finishes, let alone through an entire day. But things change so quickly. A little warm in here. Things change quickly on the racetrack. Things change quickly in this area with weather. We had a little bit of a chat before we came on the air about that. And it is one of the fantastic parts about this facility. The weather can be doing something different in turn 5 than it is in turn 8.
Well, indeed, and you know, we've been announcing here going back to the mid-'70s, and you know, we've had instances, you know, where it might be dry here on the front straight, but we might be getting a little bit of liquid sunshine down at Moss Corner. But you know, we're hopeful that things are going to clear up. This fog is going to lift, and then we'll be set to go and get our full afternoon of racing and you know, other activities in here today. Of course, tip of the announcer's cap to all of the various series and drivers and the crews who were able to get in all of the sessions here this morning. Those were not easy conditions to go out there and run a race in, but in spite of that, we saw some outstanding racing in all of the various classes that ran here, kicking off with our Radical Cup North America Series bright and early at 8 o'clock this morning.
Again, it's always so much fun to be here for a weekend because there's so many things going on that when you get a moment to kind of look up and watch on the racetrack for something. I mean, I'm obviously here to focus on the NASCAR Pinty Series, but I love watching the other divisions, listening to you guys talk about what's happening. So you kind of look up at times, look down at times, focus on what you're doing. One thing I want to talk about right now is the wide open championship battle in the NASCAR Pinty Series. We are without defending champion Alex Labbe. He has gone south. He's doing a phenomenal job in the Xfinity Series down south, giving that team some great rides out there. That leaves things wide open here, and there's so many teams that are chomping at the bit. The only two former champions that are going to contend for the title, DJ Kennington in the Castrol Edge 17, Andrew Ranger in the Mopar number 27. So both of them operating out of the same team. Those are the only two former series champions out here vying for a title. Louis-Philippe Dumoulin, I'm sorry, the WeatherTech 47. But there's so many. Cole Powell, a newcomer in the 3 machine. JF Dumoulin in the 04. Go on down the list. Alex Tagliani. For years we talked about that Rona EpiPen number 18 and how because he ran Indianapolis and always missed this race, he really never had an honest shot at the title until last year. So there was a lot of focus on him and what he was going to be able to achieve. Things didn't work out for him. There's a driver who's hungry to go out and prove that he's a championship driver. We all know it, but he hasn't done it quite yet.
Well, indeed, Adam, I agree with you. You know, there's so much talent in this series. Andrew Ranger, of course, DJ Kennington. Remember seeing DJ first time I saw him race at Delaware Speedway when he had just come out of karting and was just getting into the old CASCAR series. But what a job DJ has done, not just racing here in Canada over the years in the NASCAR Pinty Series, but what he's been able to do and representing this country well down in the NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series. So interesting to see what he will do. Certainly, I think there's still maybe a championship left in DJ Kennington. But as you said, Alex Tagliani, what a talent. Andrew Ranger is right there, and some of the other young drivers. You never know what's going to happen. And just looking at our numerical list there, the 02 of Mark Dilley. Remember, Mark, I think it was back in 1995, had such an outstanding season. And, of course, he'll be sharing that 02 car with Kerry Mix this year as Mark, I guess, handles the road courses or how. I'm not sure if they've divided up the races as yet, but I think Kerry Mix will have a few drives in that car as well. As we continue to roll the clock here on what is a optional practice session, I do hear the rumble through the fog of one of the NASCAR Pinty Series cars rolling on a pit road. So our first taker who's come out here to at least run some practice laps. And then I guess we've got a big question mark as to what's going to happen with the NASCAR Pinty Series following this optional practice session and the qualifying session that's set for the end of the day to qualify the grid for the race tomorrow. I was just flipping through. I'm a big horse race fan, and of course, lots going on here today. Not only at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, we had the royal wedding earlier over in England. And, of course, once we're wrapped up here, it'll be the second leg of the American Triple Crown with the Preakness. And as bad as we've got it here with the fog and the rain, I just saw a report where since Tuesday in Baltimore, Maryland, where they'll run the Preakness at the Pimlico, they have had 7 inches of rain since Tuesday. And no doubt about it, it's going to be a muddy racetrack as we see whether Justify could win after winning the Kentucky Derby a couple of weeks ago and go on to try to have a shot at the Triple Crown on June the 9th. So some nasty weather all over North America. Not only the fog and the rain that we're dealing with here, but we'll see which one of those drivers does elect to come out here. But it looks like the vast majority of teams electing to just sit there in the paddock and hope that things clear up, that they can get out here to qualify. And I guess that'll be a practice qualifying session if we do get it in at the end of the day.
Yeah, it looks that way. We're seeing cars roll out of the pit area now from the garage area onto pit road. They're not letting anyone onto the racetrack right now. So they're either stopping in their pit stalls or they're going down to the end of pit road where they will stage to go out. But they have not opened the racetrack just yet for the cars to head out there. And again, the teams aren't going to learn a whole lot on a racetrack like this. There's Andrew Ranger with a unique-looking Mopar number 27. They took advantage of the rule that allows them to put the number on the rear quarter panel this year instead of on the driver's door and passenger door where they would traditionally be. It looks different. Change isn't always good. It isn't always bad, but it's definitely unique. Another thing unique this season is the return of Chevrolet. Chevrolet has gotten involved with the series. They've gotten involved with Marc-Antoine Camarand. The Scott Steckley prepared cars, they're the new Chevrolet bodies. So Tony Novotny involved in that, getting these bodies put together. So for the traditional race fans who really like to see a Dodge versus a Chev versus a Ford, there's a lot more Chevrolets than we've seen in years past. And the ones that I would probably put a check mark beside, Donald Teague in the 24, Marc-Antoine Camarand in the 22, Alex Tagliani in the 18. There's three drivers who have a serious shot at being on the podium and waving that bow tie flag.
Last car count I did looked like 23. Is that gone up or down, or down one? So 22 cars officially entered here for the season opener for the NASCAR Pinty Series. And, of course, after the run here, you're going to be, I think, next stop is at Jukasa Motor Speedway. You guys do your annual Western Swing, some outstanding races coming up in Quebec. And, of course, we'll be back here for the big NASCAR weekend, the Chevy Silverado 250. That's a week earlier, not on Labor Day weekend, but it'll be on August 25th and 26th weekend. So looking forward to that and all of the other support classes that'll run what has really become the biggest car racing weekend of the year here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park.
So much fun to see the place full of campers and tents and people. They just scatter everywhere. And of course, this year we add to the schedule New Hampshire, going down to race at Loudon on the mile track there. That's new. The first time we've crossed into the United States to run a race. I know a lot of teams are pretty excited, anxiously excited about making that trip and racing on a track that, when we went to Jukasa last year, was the biggest, smoothest track that we've run on. Tons of speed. Beautiful facility. Now we've got Jukasa a couple of times, and then New Hampshire, the mile racetrack, which is really going to open some eyes.
Well, it's been a while since I've been to New Hampshire. What a beautiful part of the New England area. Of course, went there in the early 80s before that 1 mile oval was even built. They had the old Loudon road course that they used to run an annual AMA national event there. Huge crowds come out, but really a beautiful part of the state of New Hampshire. And in fact, a little bit of trivia: the movie on Golden Pond was apparently filmed at just a small resort not too far from the racetrack in that general area that becomes very busy during the summer months with cottagers and vacationers. So that should be an outstanding race on the oval there. They still do run some road race events there, but a great addition to the series. And as you said, Jukasa Motor Speedway, Alex Nagy's done an outstanding job there with that facility. I had an opportunity to catch the race that was scheduled at the end of last year to be at Kawartha, and when that facility wasn't available, it was great that Jukasa stepped up, and what a great way to finish off the championship. And as you said, they've done it right there. It is a magnificent racing facility. I don't think they've finished the work there, and look forward to maybe getting out there and catching that race in the middle of June.
You know, Pat, I think the best point you made there was that they're not done. That facility, that racetrack is going to be a small part, probably a focal point of that facility, but Kenny Hill and Jerry Montour have some huge plans there. Alex Nagy at the helm of the Speedway doing great things. It's pretty exciting. We're in an exciting time right now. Pinty's is still energized about stock car racing in Canada. TSN, of course, you can see every one of our races in high definition. on TSN. So it's an exciting time to be a racing fan here in Canada, particularly in Ontario. So we see more and more cars rolling up to the pit area. I see actually some officials getting into place, heading down towards the entrance of pit road. But no word about cars actually going on the track. Just to give an idea, from our vantage point on the outside of turn 10, we can see where the cars would be on pit road. We cannot see, Pat, where the cars would turn on the pit. We cannot see the pit entrance, which is normally really directly in front of us by, what, 100 yards?
Well, indeed, yeah. The just before we got into the lunch break, that fog that been hanging around most of the morning just settled in and got a little bit thicker. And as we look over to turn 9, we can't see the signs that are there in the turn 9 area. So visibility not really good. The drivers working their way through the clock here on an optional practice session, but as you said, Adam, none of these cars have rolled out there onto the racetrack. This will give us an opportunity to just highlight some of the other major motorsport weekends coming up here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park that, as you know, is busy pretty much 7 days a week, not only here on the big Grand Prix track, but the driver development track has been extremely busy. And the karting facility here has also been well used. Of course, following the run here this weekend will be the middle of June. I believe on the same weekend the NASCAR Pinty Series runs at Jukasa Motor Speedway. But it'll be the Varac Vintage Grand Prix weekend. That'll be on Father's Day weekend, June 15, 16, and 17. As we'll be featuring the Formula 5000 Revival Series. It's been 50 years since those Formula 5000 cars roared up the Andretti straightaway here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. That open wheel class launched in 1968. So in June, it'll be the 50-year anniversary of hearing those thundering Formula 5000 cars race here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. Then, of course, following that, on to the month of July, the Mobil 1 Sports Car Grand Prix. The July 5 to 8 schedule. They'll start with activities here on Thursday right through Sunday. We'll have the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship with the exotic prototypes and the GT race cars, as well as a host of other support class races running on that weekend. The Mobil 1 Sports Car Grand Prix here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, July 5, 6, 7, and 8, Thursday through Sunday. Maybe think about grabbing the camper or renting a motorhome and coming and making a weekend of it the middle of July. Then we'll go on to a big month of August this year as the Canadian Superbike Championship returns for their annual Superbike doubleheader weekend. That's a little bit earlier in the month, as it has traditionally been. It'll be August 10th, 11th, and 12th, but it will be the final 2 rounds of the Canadian Superbike Championship, where they will be deciding the classes not only in Pro Superbike, but also in Amateur Superbike, Amateur Sport Bike, and a brand new Amateur Lightweight Production class, where I think you're going to be hearing a lot more from a couple of talented teenagers from Oshawa, Jake and Ben Leclerc. I've been doing this a long time, Adam, as you have. I remember announcing their dad's races, and now here are these 2 fast teenagers. They're going to be part of that Amateur Lightweight Production Champion. And, of course, as we're talking a little earlier, we wrap it all up, again, moving from Labor Day last year up a week earlier to the August 24th, 25th, and 26th weekend. The NASCAR Camping World Truck Series running here in conjunction with a critical race in the NASCAR Pinty Series. Nissan Micro Cup will be here. The Ultra 94 Porsche GT3 Cup Challenge, Canada by Yokohama, along with CTCC. So another jam-packed weekend of racing, August 24, 25, 26. Advanced tickets can be purchased at CanadianTireMotorsportPark.com. Well, I've seen the races in the past, but that was my first opportunity earlier this morning to announce with Philippe Brasseur, and that is outstanding racing. And as we're saying, the guy who goes up there and wins the senior class, runs second overall, Norman Boye. I remember watching him and his brother Robert, just part of some unbelievable racing here at the racetrack back in the late 80s and early 90s. Well, really, in terms of cost per thrill, you know, the car, I think, is a little bit less than $10,000. Of course, you strip out all the creature comforts, you put in the roll cage and all the other various safety upgrades, and you've got a race car that doesn't cost you relatively a whole lot of money to go out there and race. But that was an outstanding opening race of their championship. Glad to see they've signed a brand new 3-year agreement. So that series guaranteed to run through 2020. And for the first time, that series began in Quebec in 2015. They added some Ontario rounds a year later, and now 6 races in Quebec, 6 races here in Ontario. It's even Steven, 12 rounds in total, and we're real happy to have 4 of those 12 rounds right here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. Cars out on the racetrack, the NASCAR Pinty Series. Everybody sort of just tiptoeing around here, and optional practice session. I'm not sure what you're going to learn other than maybe check some brake pads and stuff like that. But these drivers, I think, looking ahead at and wishing and hoping that at the end of the day, when they've got that qualifying session, the fog is lifted, the track is dry, and they can go out there and properly qualify these cars in what, minute 24 if it's nice and dry?
That should be a round where we're going to see them run, and I think this is a great idea. I'm listening to Trevor Hambley, our race director, on the radio. Give these guys an opportunity to go out on the racetrack. To keep things safe, they've got the caution vehicle out there, and all we can see as the vehicle comes near us is flashing lights. We really can't see much of the vehicle, but it gives these guys a chance to get the race cars up to temperature, feel the brakes, feel the throttle, just get an idea of how everything feels to them. Get comfortable in the seat. We see already, I think that was Jean-Francois Dumoulin in the Spectra Premium 04 that just peeled down pit lane. And they're not letting any more cars onto the racetrack. What they're going to do is run like this for a few laps, then they'll bring the pace truck onto pit road, and whatever cars are waiting at the end of pit road to go back out, they will go out behind the pace vehicle as well. Always safety first, and I do admire that.
So optional practice session for the NASCAR Pinty Series. They, of course, weren't here Thursday or Friday when all of the other series had an opportunity to get in some practice. And of course, yesterday we had a number of the classes qualify. But I came in here this morning very early, and I saw all the trailers heading inside here to get set up there in the big paddock that's closest to the pits. And when we're here for the media day about a week or maybe 2 weeks ago now, had a great chat with a guy that I was very familiar with, Don Thompson Jr., who was a multi-time champion, and boy, has he kept involved in the series, and one of the real good guys in the sport.
You know, it really strikes me that Don Thompson Jr. found great success when he aligned with John Fitzpatrick, and they got together. They won a lot of championships. The equipment was always top-notch. It always looked good. When they showed up at the racetrack, whether Donnie and John Fitzpatrick were driving or Donnie and J.R. Fitzpatrick were driving, everything looked good. It ran well, top shape. Now he's working for Kevin Lacroix in that bumper-to-bumper 74, and there's one thing you'll notice about that team. When they show up, it always looks good. They're always ready to go on the racetrack. That day that they had the media and sponsor day, I believe Kevin Lacroix didn't even turn 5 laps on the racetrack that day. They knew they liked what they saw. They pulled into the pits, they loaded it up and took it home. They're one to watch this season. I'm going to say between Alex Tagliani and Kevin Lacroix, I would call them #1 contenders for the championship, but don't count out Jean-Francois Dumoulin, Louis-Philippe Dumoulin, DJ Kennington, and Donald Teege, Andrew Ranger. It's a great... We've shown up here before, and people have been here year after year, probably say this year after year, but it's true. We've shown up here with more cars before, but we've never shown up with a better field than what we're looking at right now.
Well, indeed, some great quality when you look at the background and the resume of some of these drivers. That number 74 car, Kevin Lacroix, again sporting the bumper-to-bumper and total sponsorship, as we said. Don Thompson Jr., the crew chief on that car. You mentioned J.R. Fitzpatrick. I haven't heard of what JR's doing. Can we maybe see him show up for a one-off at a particular race? He was very good on the ovals, but I think even more so on the road courses.
He was a threat everywhere. That is much appreciated. Tim Southers just handed us an updated entry list, and it's ironic because I was just looking at this list, which is almost always in numerical order, and I'm not sure how they decided what order to put that one in. So I'm gonna focus on the Tim Southers delivered list. J.R. Fitzpatrick is racing late models locally in Southern Ontario. I watched him last week at Flamborough Speedway. The fact that Jukasa came on board and New Hampshire came on board, I could see the Fitzpatricks maybe taking an interest, but he's having fun. He's got a young family. So it would surprise me if they came out, but at the same time, stranger things have happened. The fella can drive a race car, that's for sure.
Well, indeed he can. So JR evidently putting family first. There is a big time commitment if you're going to do the NASCAR Pinty's Cup Series. You've got races all over the country, and you're going to be away a lot of the weekends where you're maybe missing your kids' a baseball game or soccer game or something like that. But John was an outstanding driver, and JR a chip of the old, off the old block. But I think he really took it to a new level. And Adam, I'm just thinking back here, some of the races that we did in the past, some of those monumental battles that J.R. Fitzpatrick had with Andrew Ranger when the NASCAR Pinty Series used to run out at the Edmonton City Center Airport. So we watched the cars just slowly making their way around. I don't think anybody's going any faster than 2 minutes plus out here on the racetrack. So in the fog, we work our way through this 30-minute NASCAR Pinty's optional practice session. Looks like a number of the drivers have opted to come out here and actually run some laps, but really hoping that this fog clears and the track dries and we're able to get in some kind of a further practice qualifying session right at the end of the day.
And about half of these teams were here for that test session the same day that they had media day. So they would have had a feel for what the car was doing. Others, even at this speed, if you have a vibration somewhere in the driveline, you'll be able to notice it here and get back to some work on the car. So it is valuable time on the racetrack, although you're not learning much about your setup, that's for sure. But it's more frustrating for them than it is for us. I can guarantee you that. It's been a long off season.
Well, indeed. Again, if you've just arrived here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, we welcome you to the Castrol Victoria Day Sprints, Victoria Day Speed Fest. And again, if you brought along that portable radio or you're sitting somewhere around the racing facility in your car, you could turn on the FM to 90.7, or Canadian Tire Motorsport Park public address broadcast available there. Just looking at the schedule here for the rest of the afternoon, following this practice session for the NASCAR Pinty Series. This one scheduled to go an entire hour from 12:25. I think we got started a little bit late until 1:35. So right now we have got approximately 35 minutes to go in the practice session. Following that, we'll get into our pre-race ceremonies in preparation for our Pirelli World Challenge race number 1 for the GT class. Those cars qualified here this morning. Then following that, we'll have our Ultra 94 Porsche GT3 Cup Challenge Canada race. That one is scheduled to go from 3:05 until 3:50. So that is a 45-minute race for the Ultra 94 Porsche GT3 Cup Challenge. And then following that, we'll have the second of our Pirelli World Challenge races, this time for the GTS cars. And then that is scheduled to go at 4:10. And then the NASCAR Pinty Series, their qualifying session of an hour, scheduled from 5:10 until 6:10. And again, we're hopeful of a dry racetrack and this fog having lifted by then as the Dodge pickup truck rolls up across the stripe. A couple of cars in tow as they work down into turn one. Adam?
Now, our good friend Norris McDonald said you're going to know what this means. He just popped his head into the booth and said October 20th. He said, Pat will know what that means. I have no idea.
Well, I know what he's talking about now. That, of course, is the annual Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame induction event in October. And I understand there are going to be some NASCAR Pinty Series drivers are going to be among the official inductees. I think the full official list comes out on Tuesday. I don't want to let anything out of the bag right now. I think it is officially confidential until Tuesday, but Canada has such a long and illustrious history in motorsport, and the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame does a great job of recognizing those, whether it's in stock car racing, road racing, motorcycle racing, powerboat racing, and great volunteer organization. October 20th, I believe it'll be in Toronto at the Glenn Gould Studio in the CBC building where it's been for a number of years, but I've also heard that the year after that it may be held, which seems fitting, at the auto show in Toronto during that time of the year. So there'll be a bunch of very worthy inductees who will be going in on October 20th. I think the full list will be announced this Tuesday. So there might be some things to talk about in terms of future Hall of Famers when you get to Jukasa in the middle of June.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm trying to think of people currently involved with this series. Don Thompson Jr. is a member of the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. I shouldn't have started
Tony is in there, I think, isn't he?
I believe so, and I shouldn't have started this thought process out loud. I should have started it in my head and then came out. But I know Don Thompson Jr. is
And another guy who is in there as we watch just a handful of cars circulate, and I really associate him with Castrol, and that is the late Craig Hill. What a great guy. Had spent so many weekends, not only when him and I were doing the old CASCAR series that Castrol was very much involved in, but of course for many years the Canadian Superbike series that Castrol sponsored. And I know they've got a whole variety of various guests who will be here this weekend in the hospitality suites. And I always, they used to call him Castrol Craig Hill, and he was loved and liked by people on whether it was four wheels or two wheels. Just a great guy who, of course, raced right here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park back in the old Players Atlantic series that ran in this country in the 60s and early 70s. So a little bit of motorsport history on a foggy Saturday at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park.
There's always something you can learn, that's for sure. And I think you do yourself justice. If you're a racing fan, even if you're a brand new racing fan, you've never been, you thought, I want to experience this, do yourself a favor and go through research a little bit. Look back at some of the amazing contributions to motorsports that have happened in Canada. The great Richard Petty, the King, ran his first NASCAR race in Canada at the CNE in the 1950s, in which he got wrecked by his father, Lee. Lee went on to win the race. But there's so many tie-ins to this area. We're spoiled with, I mean, for me, Junior Hanley is about the king of stock car racing. We used to get to watch him weekly at Flamborough Speedway. I mean, that man is still revered by people in the stock car racing world. There's so many things in so many areas. You mentioned superbikes, some of the road racing. Mosport was Ron Fellows said it best on Media Day. He said, this is a bucket list racetrack for road racers around the world.
Well, indeed. And speaking of road racing, of course, last last August, the Canadian Motorcycle Grand Prix that was held here during Canada's centennial year, 1967. They celebrated the 50th anniversary of that with an outstanding event here. I think it was a week or two weeks before the Chevy Silverado 250 and your big NASCAR Pinty Series round here. So yeah, this racetrack has got a phenomenal history. And when you look back, and you can probably, hop on the internet and Google a lot of this stuff, just some amazing, images of what the racing was like back then. And as we look across the way, of course, we're announcing from this state-of-the-art modern tower here that was built as part of the revitalization of the racetrack. But I look across there and expect to see that old Castrol Tower that we started announcing in 1973.
I hated it.
Yeah, it was.
It was so hard. It was so hard to call a race from that vantage point. You could see 3 turns.
Yeah, you could, but those were the days of no monitors to see what was going on elsewhere on the racetrack. You did the old manual lap charts, and if on a good weekend, you might have an announcer down at Moss and maybe one up at the turn 2-3 area, and you could sort of piece together the race lap. But here today, we can look at the video monitor and pretty much call the race all the way around the racetrack.
Sometimes. There are times we don't have the monitor, but how many races did you call here with assistance from corner marshals? You listen to what the corner marshals are talking about. All you're doing is telling a story, right? And they would help fill in some of the blanks that we couldn't see. I prefer having the monitor.
Well, you mentioned the corner workers, and I think this is a good opportunity to give them some credit. The Motorsport Marshalling Services Group, who take care of all of the big weekends here. They also do a lot of the car club weekends that run here throughout the summer. I believe they've got a booth in the marketplace, Motorsports Marshalling Services. So certainly one way to get close to the action, but as much as sometimes we complain about our long days here, those marshals are here usually an hour before anything rolls on the racetrack and here throughout the day, and of course have to deal with weather conditions that we're experiencing here today at the racetrack. Again, if you've just joined us at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park here this afternoon, Castrol presents the Victoria Day Speedfest weekend. Beautiful day here on Thursday for all of the test days. Gorgeous day yesterday for practice and qualifying. And then today happens. So dealing with the fog and the rain earlier, it does look in the last few minutes that the fog is beginning to lift. I think the rain, if it hasn't completely stopped, it just about has, as we look at one of the other cars rolling onto pit road. So the Dodge safety truck rolls on the start-finish straightaway. But, Adam, I'm not sure if any of the cars who were out here earlier are still circulating on the racetrack. They may all be back on pit road.
Yeah, I believe. And all they're doing is coming out for that one partial lap, because from pit exit to pit entrance, feeling things out. There's lots of chatter on the radio. Teams wanting to do a little bit of work on pit road. And, opening weekend is a big event. It's a big event for the officials, for the teams, the subtle changes. So everyone's got to get used to the system once again. You're talking about corner workers. I like to think of them as the carnies of the motorsport world. And I say that in the nicest possible way, but they're so devoted, so dedicated. They're the first ones here. They're the last ones to leave. And as you mentioned, they put in long, hard days and put themselves in harm's way to help us put on a show.
Adam, let's talk a little bit about the actual race cars. I ran into Tony Novotny here, who does the body work for these race cars, and they have added some skirts to the bottom of the body work to just give it a little cleaner, more finished look to the race cars. Any talk or scuttlebutt in terms of what that might do to the handling or even the lap times, hopefully, as we get up to speed?
In our cars, in our series, we are still not an aero-dependent series. Aerodynamics in every other NASCAR series is so critically important. We still have a template for the bodies and the way they're built and the way Tony builds them. you can rip most of it off and still be all right. Now, when we go to Loudon, when we go to New Hampshire, that's going to be a game changer. Now down south that they've gone to the composite bodies, it's always been a cost savings measure up here to run the fiberglass bodies, because there was a time when it was 5 digits to have a body mounted on a NASCAR stock car, whether it's in the K&N series or the Xfinity series or ARCA, where ARCA now falls under the NASCAR umbrella. So expensive to put a body on it, and if you lean on it on the fender, Pat, you've ruined it. You've ruined the downforce, and I hate it. I hate it. Take the arrow away. Let these guys race. That's why our cars can race so close together. I mean, if you saw Kyle Busch in the post-race interview last night after the truck race in Charlotte, he was he didn't hold anything back about how terrible he feels the bodies are. He says you can't get within 5 car lengths of another truck and still be able to drive your truck. It's out of control. Our cars, you can almost get into the passenger seat of the car beside you, and you can still wheel these race cars. And I think our fans are so fortunate that we have that. We've prettied them up with help from Tony Novotny and the changes to the bodies. We've definitely made the cars prettier. They present better. We're still going to have that Canadian style action that we've always enjoyed.
Well, just looking at the clock here, coming up that'll be about 25 minutes officially on the clock here. This was a practice session that became a optional practice session for the drivers. As we said, a handful of cars did come out here and run some laps. But right now, with the heavy fog that's settled in here, I'm not sure what it's like elsewhere around the racetrack. But as we said, did look as though it lifted a little bit, but now it looks like another thicker band has rolled in. And as we look out of our announce booth here overlooking turn 10, as we said, can't quite see turn number 9. So,
well, at least we've got the monitor where we can see fog from another part of the facility. So we can see our fog, and then we can see turn 1 fog on the screen. We've got all our bases covered.
Well, looking ahead to tomorrow, I believe the forecast is better. We'll try to get an update on that, but we're less than 25 minutes to go in this optional practice session for the NASCAR Pinty Series drivers, and it looks like one of our cameramen drying off the lens.
I hope I didn't offend the cameraman or the producer in talking about the fog.
We're looking at that shot from turn 1, looking back at the far east end of pit road where the Dodge safety truck has rolled into position, and we'll see if he heads back out here in the next 20 minutes or so as we count down this official 1-hour optional practice session for the NASCAR Pinty Series. So 22 cars, including a number of rookie drivers. Adam, what about the rookie drivers in the series? 22 cars, and it looks like we've got 3 rookie drivers who have come out here to run. James Vance out of nearby Stouffville, Ontario, in the number 1 car. The Quebec driver out of Saint-Julie, Quebec, Ramon Guy. And then Brett Taylor out of Calgary, Alberta, the Rockstar Energy drink. That's one of the Joey McColm cars. That is a Dodge.
Yeah, and Brett Taylor's run with us some before, so he's got some experience with our cars. Raymond Gay, he's run some races before. We've not seen him before on an oval track, so I'd love to see these guys sort of cross over, get the road racers on an oval track. I want to talk to James Vance. I haven't had enough chance because on the other entry list, he's listed from Northamptonshire, United Kingdom. The team, of course, out of Stouffville. So I'd love to have a chat with him. And just another thing about our race cars, they're not like any other race car in the world. The technological advances in motorsports have not all crept into our series. A lot of things have been kind of held back. Let's control costs. They're a bulky race car, lots of horsepower, not the kind of handling you see out of sports cars. So that's when it's so much fun to see these rookies come into the series. Because if you're used to racing, say, a Pirelli Challenge Series, those cars are low to the ground. They turn on a dime. They handle great. Our cars, you've really got to work them. I mean, throttle control, brake control, being easy with the steering wheel. most people that we see hop out of our race car say, man, I felt like a driver. You know, when I'm driving that, I feel like I make a big difference in the car. So I love talking to guys, and you list those rookies. I'll get a chance between practice and qualifying to go see, hey, what do you think? How's it feel sitting in the cockpit, and what do you hope to achieve?
Well, with the weather here in the fog, there were the autograph sessions that were scheduled earlier. One in the Pirelli World Challenge that has been postponed until tomorrow at 2:15 p.m. during the lunch break, and also the Porsche GT3 Cup Series autograph session that was canceled a little bit earlier this morning. So we continue to work our way through the clock here on about 20 minutes to go in this optional practice session for the NASCAR Pinty Series. And of course, this race being videotaped by Joel Robinson and the crew there for broadcast coming up on TSN that it's been on for many years now. Of course, TSN, the home of NASCAR here in Canada, not only showing the NASCAR Pinty Series, but the Cup races, and it's been an outstanding relationship. And Joel Robinson and his crew, some of the best cameramen in the business, do an outstanding job of putting those shows together.
What do you remember? What year you would have first worked with Jim Robinson, Joel's dad, and Joel, of course?
Well, it goes back till the probably early '80s when we were doing motorcycle stuff, and then after that into the CASCAR series. Of course, eventually became the NASCAR Pinty Series, but. Jim, I believe he was one of the guys nominated for induction into the Motorcycle Hall of Fame for all his work that goes back probably over 50 years now, going back to the 60s when, of course, they were using film to record all of the racing events, including those early years of the Players Atlantic Series and other events that he's done over the years. So Joel sort of picked up the torch and carried on with the company, still doing some outstanding job and some great innovation in terms of the onboard cameras and where they mount cameras. They were always pushing the envelope to give the race fan at home a better sense as what it was like to really be in that race car and really put them in the middle of the race and really enhance the experience for the race fan watching at home.
And if you get a chance to watch, if you watch on MAV TV, you get to watch a lot of different kind of stock car racing. You'll really appreciate that. I don't care for the announcers on it, but the video production that Joel Robinson puts together is pretty good. I haven't heard, and we talked earlier, we were hearing lots of chatter on the NASCAR officials radio about what was going on, and it has been dead silence for the last number of minutes.
So as we look out of our announced position again, ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the weather forecast on a day where I didn't get up early enough to watch the royal wedding, but I hope they didn't have weather like this. I'm sure it was pretty good.
It was beautiful.
Oh, okay.
I don't even know why.
So
Pat.
we're paying for it now here today, and as we were saying earlier, 7 inches of rain all week at Baltimore, Maryland, where the Preakness runs today, I believe at about 6:50, and no doubt about it, they're going to have a soggy wet track. 8 horsepower in that race is what we've been told, barring any scratches prior to the start. But yeah, the weather, whether you blame it on global warming, the weather has been very volatile and unpredictable, it seems, in the last decade or two. And right now we continue to be socked in here with the fog. And, of course, we'll wait for a further update. The schedule following the conclusion of our NASCAR Pinty Series practice does call for, following the conclusion of this session, we'll be rolling up the Pirelli World Challenge GT race. That one's scheduled for 50 minutes, set to go at 1:55 this afternoon. Following the podium presentations, and I assume we'll be going to the podium following that Pirelli World Challenge GT race. We'll have the Ultra 94 Porsche GT3 Cup Challenge. What a battle we had in qualifying this morning. We'll update that for you as we get a little bit later in the schedule this afternoon and prepare to go with a 45-minute race in the Ultra 94 Porsche GT Cup Challenge set to go at 3:05 p.m. Then we'll have the second half of our Pirelli World Challenge doubleheader. This time, the GTS class cars. They'll go at 4 o'clock, 4:10, with their pre-race starting at 4 p.m. And then once all of that racing is in the books, we'll have the NASCAR Pinty Series qualifying session, a full hour, Adam. So assuming the fog lifts and the track dries up, the drivers will have a full 1 hour. That's going to become, are they going to split that practice and qualifying, or it just becomes a combined practice and qualifying session?
If they stick with tradition, they're going to split the field in half. I don't know how they'll do that, given that nobody turned a time in practice. And they generally only give them about 10 to 15 minutes of on-track time for qualifying. So what they'll do is they'll open the track for the first group, which should be 11 cars, to go out there and try to run their best lap. And the kink that throws in the works is whatever tires they qualify on, they have to start tomorrow's race on. So that's where you see someone like Kevin Lacroix, the driver with the biggest nerve, will lay down a huge lap, pull in the pits, and be done. 1 lap on the tires, they're fresh for tomorrow. We may see others, because they didn't get much practice here in this session, we may see others use that whole time up and say, you know what, I'm going to risk putting 6-7 laps on my tires because I want to know what the car is going to do. So they just came in and said there's 15 minutes left in this practice session, which there is no activity. The caution truck is on the track.
Well, there's one car, the number 46 of Brett Taylor, the Calgary, Alberta driver in that Rockstar Energy drink. Joey McColm, the team owner, as I think he might be the lone driver who has ventured out here onto the racetrack.
Yeah, Brett Taylor, he is so pumped up about this season. I'm looking forward to seeing him travel with us. It's such a great way. How many series do you have where you've got seasoned veterans like Alex Tagliani, Andrew Ranger, who was a young gun when he entered the series and won the championship back in 2007. But you can take a young race car driver, and you're being thrown in to compete against some of the best road racers in the world in stock cars.
Yeah, and don't forget, prior to coming to the NASCAR Pinty Series, both Alex Tagliani and Andrew Ranger were two of the top drivers in the IndyCar Series. Remember watching some of their exploits. I think they may have done some double duty at Edmonton one year. I'd have to double check that. Maybe not.
Yeah, I'm not. Now that you say that, it sounds familiar. The other driver I'm really interested to watch this weekend is Anthony Simoni from nearby Aurora, Ontario in the 95 machine. He has been really successful this winter, racing down south in some of the road course races, road course racing series. That has to help. The confidence he's gained with some podium results down there. He's always had reliability issues. I shouldn't say always, but in the last number of years. I believe in Edmonton he was on the podium one year. I think Edmonton might have been one of his best finishes back in the early years of the series. But I think Anthony Simoni could surprise some people this weekend with a great run.
22 NASCAR Pinty Series cars listed here for the opening race of the championship. They will make a return visit to Canadian Tire Motorsport Park on the August 25th and 26th weekend. Adam, traditionally, assuming we've got a dry racetrack, are the cars quicker here when they come back in August than they would be at the opening round, or are they running about the same lap times for qualifying?
They're running about the same lap times. What really changes when they come in August is the rubber that the trucks put down. The trucks really lay down a lot of that Goodyear rubber around the racetrack, and it definitely affects where these cars like to run and how they get through the apex of the turn. So there's little changes there, but the characteristics of the racetrack are very different when they come back for the second event. Speeds, I don't know why the speeds continue to increase, but every year they come back, they're able to shave time off. J.R. Fitzpatrick used to be a magician with that. Like, he would go out and turn a lap that would make people's heads spin. They wonder, how the heck is he doing that? Next time we show up, everyone's running those speeds, and someone else has picked up another half second.
So again, for the benefit of those who have just joined us here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, we continue to work our way through the remaining 11 or 12 minutes or so of the NASCAR Pinty Series practice. Right now, just one race car out on the track for the optional practice session. That is the number 46 of Brett Taylor, the CBRT Dodge. They, of course, field a number of different drivers over the course of the season, and Brett Taylor out of Calgary, one of 3 rookie drivers among the 22 who are here for the opening round. But he is the lone car still out there on the racetrack as the Dodge safety truck makes his way around this 2.459-mile track as we count down the end of this practice session, with 3 races and a qualifying session still to come here this afternoon, as we'll have at 1:55, following our pre-race ceremonies, we'll have the Pirelli World Challenge GT Race 1 of the weekend. That'll go 50 minutes on the clock. Following that, we'll have the Ultra 94 Porsche GT3 Cup Challenge Canada race. That is at 3:05 p.m. That'll be a 45-minute race. And then the second half of our Pirelli World Challenge doubleheader for the GTS class will roll off here at 4:10 p.m. this afternoon. That'll also be 50 minutes, race 1 of 2 on the weekend for the GTS class in the Pirelli World Challenge. And then, as we're saying, hope to see these NASCAR Pinty Series cars, all 22 of them, out for a qualifying session with an hour on the clock between 5:10 and 6:10 p.m., the scheduled time for that qualifying session. As you heard from Adam, they will split the field into 2 qualifying groups, an 11 or 11. At least that was the original plan. Depending on what happens here in the next few hours with the weather, NASCAR Pinty Series officials may go to Plan B, and what Plan B is, we really don't know by right now.
No, you get used to being on a need-to-know basis, Pat. And I've learned that over the years, that Plan B, I don't get to know that until it's time to roll out Plan B. So it's exciting. You get to learn things on the fly. Mark Dilley is on pit road. He's looking to go back out onto the racetrack, so the pace truck is going to roll down and pick him up. We've seen probably 8 or 10 cars drive down pit lane and take the hard right turn back towards the garage area. So a lot of these teams are done with their practice. Another one heading back to the garage there. One of the Dumoulin machines.
Yeah, it looks like a number of drivers have already wrapped up things there on pit road. Whatever laps that they're going to turn during this optional practice session, they have already completed. Of course, Mark Dilley, one of the veteran drivers in this series. Dilley was on the original sheet on that 02. But as I look on that sheet that we were given here about 15-20 minutes ago, it looks like Kerry Mix is listed as the driver in the 02.
Well, and that would make a lot more sense, because Kerry in
generally
past
road
years,
courses, and Mark does the ovals. But I did see Mark here on Friday, so we assume the latest entry list here does have the correct driver, and that would be Kerry Mix, Mount Albert, Ontario, in the Leland Industry Ford. His wife Susan Mix listed as the team owner in that 02 car. So Dilley out and Mixie in the 02 is what we understand right now.
And as we look through the entry list, I would say, whether it's Mark Dilley or Kerry Mix, they are sort of the senior guard right now, having had the longest history of stock car racing. DJ Kennington is getting up there. He's run a lot of years. But I would say the 02, Mark Dilley or Kerry Mix, they've been at this game a long, long time. So this will be the last session onto the racetrack. So once they're done with this, they're going to roll them down pit road, and that'll be it for this practice session. So nobody really able to wind these cars out. They're going to have to wait until later on this afternoon.
Well, the Pirelli World Challenge GT class cars already starting to line up in that pre-grid area on the other side of pit road. They're scheduled to roll out here at 1:45 for the pre-race, and then a scheduled start to their 50-minute race at 1:55 p.m. this afternoon. As we said, that'll be followed at 3:05 with the Ultra 94 Porsche GT3 Cup Challenge race. That one's scheduled for 45 minutes. Then the second half of the Pirelli World Challenge doubleheader with the GTS class. That goes from 4:10 until 5 o'clock. And then to close out our Saturday schedule here at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, our Castrol presents the Victoria Day Speedfest weekend will be the NASCAR Pinty Series qualifying. Now, looking ahead to tomorrow, we're going to be on the racetrack at 8:15 with a qualifying session for the CTCC Series after they ran their opening race of the weekend earlier this morning. We'll have the third race for the Radical Cup North America Series. They raced here at the end of the day yesterday in the dry, and then were the first of the classes to test the wet track conditions this morning, bright and early at 8 o'clock. We'll have the Pirelli World Challenge GTS Race 2 in the morning, followed by the second of the Ultra 94 Porsche GT3 Cup Challenge races in the morning to take us to about 12 noon and the lunch break. And then, of course, the Clarington 200 NASCAR Pinty Series race, 51 laps is what they will run here tomorrow afternoon, and our feature race on the Sunday. How many scheduled pit stops for tires, fuel in 51 laps here?
If all goes well, they'll stop once for fuel and tires. They definitely need to stop for fuel. We've seen in the past Anthony Simone has run the race without taking on tires. I believe he did that to a podium finish. He might have finished fourth in that event, but it has been attempted. But generally, the winning strategy is to pit right around lap 15. Then you can go the distance on fuel, put tires on at that point. We'll see teams make multiple pit stops, but quite often it's a one-stop venture is the winning formula, Pat.
So checking our official clock here, we're coming up on less than 5 minutes before they'll officially close out this NASCAR Pinty Series practice session, as we had just a handful of cars take to the racetrack. And as we said, it looks like the rains, from what we can tell, have all but subsided, but we're still dealing with that thick fog that's blanketed Canadian Tire Motorsport Park and the surrounding rolling hills here in the area, and this part of the Oak Ridges Moraine. I think this is towards the eastern end of that moraine, and it just seems to have a bit of a microclimate all of its own.
It is improving, at the moment, because we can see bodies over there with the race cars for the cars that are coming on next, and there's been moments where we haven't been able to see that row of cars, so small improvement. But you know what else I noticed, Pat? That yellow flag that's been sitting in front of us there in turn 10, it seems to be blowing just a little bit harder. I'd like to see that blowing real hard. I'd like to see a good wind come in and see what the wind does to it, but at least try to get something moving.
Well, you need that sunshine to try to burn off the fog, or a good stiff wind to blow it on out of here. And right now we've got the benefit of neither of those properties. So right now we continue to be socked in here with the fog activity on pit road, as we have that Pirelli World Challenge GT race scheduled for 50 minutes. Set to go at 1:55. As soon as we zero out the clock on our NASCAR Pinty Series practice, we'll look at the pre-race activities, and then looking to take a green flag at 1:55 this afternoon for race 1 for the Pirelli World Challenge GT class. A little bit later on, we'll have the GTS class. That race also scheduled for 50 minutes.
Still lots of entertainment to come today. We hope you've got plenty of firewood and it's staying dry. And you've stocked up with plenty of refreshments. It's one of those days, Pat.
It certainly is. And if you've been doing this for decades, you've had a few days like this in terms of having to deal with the weather. We'll also try to give you an update. Of course, we do have the traditional Victoria Day weekend fireworks that is scheduled to take place at dusk. That is, I think, somewhere around 9:15 around that time. But we'll get you an update on the fireworks. As we said, we're scheduled to go here later on this evening as we await the weather to hopefully move on out of there. We see that the couple of the last cars rolling off of pit road, the Dodge safety truck has also gone under that Michelin bridge. So the NASCAR Pinty Series wrapping up their 1 hour practice session, and then we'll be setting sail here on our Pirelli World Challenge GT race that'll be up here next on the schedule. Again, if you brought along that portable radio, you can tune us in at 90.7 on the FM dial. We've got 3 big races coming up, and then Adam is going to rejoin us, hopefully with the fog gone and the track dry for what I'm sure if we've got conditions anywhere close to that, we're going to have a thrilling 1 hour qualifying session for the NASCAR Pinty Series to put a wrap on our Saturday schedule here at the Castrol Presents, the Victoria Day Speed Fest weekend. Adam, always good to work with you here, and we look forward to working with you a little bit later on today. And of course, big 51 lap race coming up here tomorrow to kick off the NASCAR Pinty Series.
Sounds great, Pat. It's the only way to kick off the series. Great tradition, great field of cars. I promise they're going to go faster next time they're on the racetrack.
Okay, Adam Ross, the voice of the NASCAR Pinty Series, who follows the tour throughout Canada. And of course, we'll make a return here to Canadian Tire Motorsport Park on the August 25th and 26th weekend when the NASCAR Pinty Series is back here for another race on the road course. So the Pirelli World Challenge GT race scheduled for 50 laps as they're about to roll out of that pre-grade area onto pit road as we prepare to launch here at 1:55 this afternoon, a 50-minute timed event. As, again, the teams and drivers going to the rain tires, making other adjustments to the suspension just to soften it up in most cases a little bit to adjust for the current wet track conditions after these drivers all qualified out here in the wet this morning, as did the GTS class cars that will race a little bit later on this afternoon. Let's see if we can check in with Jim Martin as we wrap up our NASCAR Pinty Series practice. Jim, are you there?
Yes, sir. We're here. Enjoying the beautiful sunshiny day on the outside. Okay, well, the sunshine is just above the fog layer, I understand. However, the fog layer over the course of the afternoon will gradually be dissipating, we're hoping. The bottom line is it's always a challenge, and I think everybody has been to the Victoria Day Speedfest race weekends from time to time, and it has been slightly less than perfect on any given occasion. However, if you got 3 days, the odds of having the perfect 3 days, let's be honest, slim. If this is as bad as the bad piece of the weather gets, hey, this is okay with me. We know how to dress for cool. This is Canada. We know how to dress for wet. Well, we've been shoveling snow for the past couple of months. The bottom line is it's getting better. The trend is good. Tomorrow looks even better. As far as things going on the racetrack, we've got just a sock full of stuff that we'd like to pass on and remind you about if you haven't had the opportunity to check it out just yet. Canadian Tire, a proud sponsor for the racing community, and of course, improving Canadian Tire Motorsport Park to enhance the experience for both the drivers and you and me, the fans. We're glad to be able to have everybody come and join us today and join us in our love of racing as well. There's a number of people along the front grandstand, along the start-finish line. I'd like to say hi, everybody. Thanks for everybody for coming out. Thanks for bringing your friends. And, of course, we know that everybody on the way home today, if you're not staying at the track or nearby.
7's on ND2. Copy that.
under control, I think we'll be good to go. The good thing is sunset doesn't happen till... So we have the American Vintage race weekend coming up in just a couple of times, as a matter of fact. And the highlight of this vintage race weekend is going to be the historic 5,000 cars. The over-the-wheel machine, the North American Formula One machine, basically Formula One looking car. The Nissan Micro Cup, and of course, the Silverado 250 race weekend is the Chevy World Cup Series event. Well, that's the 26th issue. It was a race weekend, but you don't get a... Well, indeed, I think that will just add to the tremendous crowd that we get out for the Chevy Silverado 250 moving off of Labor Day weekend. That'll allow some of the families with young kids who on Labor Day weekend are thinking about school on Tuesday. And it'll be now August 24th. on a list here before they're going to roll these cars. Because as you said, absolutely safety is paramount, and the Motorsport Marshalling Services folks have got to be able to see from marshalling station to marshalling station in order to safely run the race. course, the weather here today also canceling a couple of autograph sessions that we had scheduled with the IMSA Ultra 94 Porsche GT3 Cup Challenge. They had an autograph session at 11:15 this morning that was canceled. There was also a Pirelli World Challenge autograph session set for 12:15 this afternoon during the lunch break. That has been
In 2007 when we were here, it was completely fine. We all started on slick tires in Formula One, and then we do the warm-up lap, and like you see a dark cloud all of a sudden out of nowhere just appearing, and some cars dive in the pits, and I'm fighting for the championship. I'm like, I just want to do whatever my rival's doing, so whatever I need to do, let's do it. So we started the race on we started on slicks, and the first lap I had a dark visor too. I couldn't see anything. I was hydroplaning everywhere. It was the back straight, I was sideways.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a very, very foggy Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. Obviously here for the Pirelli World Challenge Grand Prix of Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, all part of the Victoria Day Speed Fest. And as Victoria Day veterans know, sometimes this place can throw a little bit of a wrinkle into things. And this day it has been fog. Rainy this morning, but had qualifying, then the fog rolled in, and they have just announced, and you can see from what you're watching on screen here, it is virtually impossible to even see a few feet, let alone the required corner station, being able to see the flags of the previous corner station and the one downstream from it as well. You can't even see the corner station at this stage. So everything has been delayed in terms of Pirelli World Challenge competition until 4:10 this afternoon. Now, if you're looking at your schedule, you'll see that was the window for the GTS race. And obviously that means that everything is going to be either compressed right to the end of the day or rescheduled at some point. So we will continue to be here, obviously. As we get word, we'll come up on the stream as best we can and update you. Also suggest that you keep your eyes glued to World-Challenge for any news that might be unfolding there as well. But we are delayed at least right now until 4:10 for the GT race. If there's changes and they run the GTS race before that, we'll certainly try and update you. Thanks for your patience and staying with us. It means everything.
World Challenge official